introduce Dr. William Ryan, and he's going to talk to us about onboarding, a virtual approach. I've known Bill for a long time, but he is a consultant to other businesses. So if you find yourself in need of somebody to help you with leadership and other things like that, Bill's definitely somebody to connect with. But Bill, go ahead and start us off.
I will. You need to somehow let me share.
All right. Let me see. Whoops. That's not what I wanted to do. All right, let's try it again. Okay, now give it a try.
Ready. Thank you. All right. So I love using the chat. So Valerie, you're not going to miss a thing. Sorry, you're in a noisy space, but well, I'll share a little bit about me while you guys share a little bit about you. Bill Ryan. I'm down here in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm not a native, as you might be able to tell, but I've been here for a number of years. A health insurance company brought me down. I've been in the L&D space for most of my career, and in the distance aspect of it for most of my career. I go back in the time when we used to use video discs, and when satellites had a dish on top of a building or a truck. I call these racing stripes. But I've been lucky in my career. I've been a chief learning officer, worked in both insurance and health and manufacturing. And the last 6 years have been on my own, which has been kind of an interesting experience along the way. I think this last year has been one of the most eye-opening in terms of my interests in remote and distance work, and having the opportunity to talk to people that are finally willing to have that conversation about, can you do it? And one of the big things that's always been a personal bugaboo is onboarding for me. It's just always has kind of made me a little nuts. So I'm curious about, please share with me some of the things that you think about onboarding, clinical training. Valeria, onboarding is usually, how many of you at some point in time have come from the one and done onboarding, even your own experiences? I think that's one of the challenges that we often fall into in terms of our space and our place. Hi, Sandy, thanks for coming in. One of the things that I think comes into the idea of being virtual is it has given us a chance to really take the time to reevaluate processes and practices that have been standardized, that we used to think this is the way we had to do things, and they don't. My focus is that, onboarding is our first chance to retain this person for a while. When I work with companies, and even in my prior roles, I would start conversations going, do you want to make money? And of course, organizations say yes. And I say, well, keep people then. I mean, the turnover is expensive. Hiring is expensive. And the one and done doesn't cut it. So onboarding is the idea that, it's the first chance to retain this person and create success for not only the individual, but as Jeffrey says, it's a chance to make a good first impression. And selfishly, for the hiring managers, it's the chance for you to succeed as well. I mean, there are people that I'm sure you know who have turnover in their departments. And at some point in time, people are going, what is up with that? This is the real opportunity to look at how you can build for success for everybody. Now, this whole idea of being virtual, I think has actually given us a chance to say, when do we want to start reaching out to people? And this is about a design model and a way that I think we can focus on engaging people to increase their retention. And the next part of that is reducing their time to proficiency, because there's a difference between going to work and being proficient. So I think the sooner we can get people aligned to their purpose, understanding the practices and the processes, they will become proficient. And again, that's good business. It's a cost savings, and it's a way for people to feel successful at work. And this does cost a lot of money when you think about it. So just throw in a chat. So let's take the first one. Hourly, this information comes from an onboarding document from last year, middle of summer. So it's almost, I'm just checking my notes here. So it's about 8 months old, but this came out of SHRM. What do you think that hourly workers, when do you think they leave new jobs? This is from late last year. 2 months, 6 months, 3 months, 4 months. You guys are very close. How about outside hires? Now, these are senior folks. So what do you think about outside hires? How many months for them? This is like managers, leaders, seniors. 3 months. Okay. 4 to 6. 24, 12. Close, guys. 18 months. You guys are on top of this. Now, the cost of replacing a worker. Now, this kind of obviously ranges. So, this is kind of a ballpark between, leadership, hourly employees, 1.5 times. Okay. What do you guys say? What else do you think? 2 times. Yeah. Comes in at 50 to 60% of their salary, believe it or not. Now, when you do look at some of the leadership, you're talking about 2.5 times. That is, when you look at more senior leadership. So you guys are looking at that kind of, when you take in the hourly employees though, you're looking at whatever their salary was, half of that, just replace them. I would hazard a hypothesis that in the last probably 6 months, that has, even at that lower end, the hourly range, that has increased, given some of the impact of the pandemic, but also some of the bills that have come out of sorry about that, that have come out of Congress in terms of trying to help people. So I'll be interested to see if that does shift. Glassdoor was reporting it takes, how many days do you think it got to fill a position? And this is, again, last fall, about 8 months ago. And depending on where you are in the country, I would say this is probably a shifting target. But what do you think? 60 days? Oh my goodness! Boy, you were really close, Oliver. 52 days. And the biggest question for me, and how many of you, before I answer this question, time to proficiency, how many of you in your organizations have kind of a cost factor of the time to proficiency model? If you haven't, we should talk, because that is one of the best L&D conversations you can have, is reducing time to proficiency. Because that is a human, you can put, a cost figure to that. And this, again, it does depend a little bit more on what, who's doing what, but 8 to 26 weeks, and they say somewhere in between here, it goes, executives are going to be in the high end, more of your hourly employees are going to be on the lower end, but somewhere in that time frame, you're going to get the idea. So when you look at all these numbers, you can assign cost factors to all these things. So when you think about it, and in that, you can start thinking about how this impacts the organization in terms of cost, in terms of time, in terms of retention. So when you think about your own experience, you didn't have an onboarding, Valeria? Oh my goodness. You were thrown into the pool and told to swim 15 years ago, okay? I remember coming in one time for a orientation program, and the HR director had come in. I was an instructional designer, and said, "Why are you here today? I have you coming in tomorrow." I had the letter in my hot little hand. This was many years ago. They were just screwed up. That was a forecaster of what that organization was like, might I add. It was kind of thing. Big information dump, filling in forms. That's very, very true. Well, there's a lot of that, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So when you think about this, what do you think from the organization's perspective? When we think about onboarding, you already know my bias is roaring out, advocating for the employee, advocating for their success, and selfishly trying to say this is, their success is your success, Mr. and Mrs. Organization. But from the organization's perspective, what do you think onboarding should be providing? in terms of meeting their needs? What are the things that, what's in it for them? Tell me, what do you think the organization's WIFM is?
Opportunity to get to know the new person, opportunity to mentor and bring them on board, welcome them in a way that's going to be memorable, and it's a mutual feel good.
It should be. I would absolutely agree with you.
I mean, I was involved with facilitating onboarding week one of employees orientation. No one is more excited and passionate about their work than on day one.
Mm-hmm.
So if you lose that, that's a problem.
Absolutely. And yet when you look at, and when you get feedback from HR directors, this is the kind of list that's on the top of their mind, is these kind of things. And when you think about that, I mean, it totally makes sense, especially the compliance issue, of trying to make sure where these kind of needs, they want to make sure that these people come in and don't do something wrong. But when you contrast those with the employee's perspective, you can kind of see that we have a little conflict. The org has the desire, the need to get these people into work as soon as possible. And this is kind of where the one and done comes in. And the new hire, to your point, Sandy, was they're excited, they're interested, they want to feel welcomed, they want to feel valued, they want to be heard, and so there's a balance between that need for effectiveness and emotions, between creating a commitment to work and creating a community of workers who want to be capable. And
ideally it translates to early productivity.
Absolutely.
And employee satisfaction.
Absolutely. And now we're back down to, success breeds satisfaction. I'm often reminded in the educational space that the time when students drop out of distance learning courses historically, before the pandemic, was usually the 2 days before they could drop without penalty, a financial penalty. But yet most traditional online courses had kind of like midterms and some self-tests and then a final, which was a horrible design. And I fought it the entire time I was doing all that work. And when I led a statewide initiative for an online program, we revamped the entire curriculum to preload the first third of the courses with tests, quizzes, assessments, case studies, so that they had positive feedback and or were able to be caught quickly for remediation, to be coached, to be heard, to be supported, academically, to be successful. And the completion rates more than doubled in changing that model. So early on, you want positive feedback. You want to know what's going on. And I think that's the kind of what Valeria says here is psychological safety. That, all good companies who have long-term successes have proven. Google did that whole study. Got to have that psychological safety for people to be able to, have this kind of, this conversation. Yeah, I think I'm not sure how we set this up because I forgot to ask. So Jeff, you'll have to guide me a little bit. But this is a model of, and if you have an opinion that you could put this, put your opinions, stamp your opinions on here of some of the things that you have had in yours, the things that you did have and the things you wish you had, that you could start thinking about ways that things that should be included to create that happy, productive employee, as Jeff kind of notes. I'm not sure if the annotations are turned on or off. Jeff, you'll have to kind of let me know.
It looks like, wait a minute, annotations. Oh, I think maybe you have control of that on your screen.
Okay.
Your presenter. So I think annotations are near the top of the screen.
I have to get back over to.
Yeah, I think you have to stop sharing. Wait a minute, view options. Oh, here we go. View options, annotate. I don't know, does everybody see those? Or does everybody have to do their own?
They have to do their own. It's
Okay.
yeah. Unfortunately, when I'm in presentation mode, my Zoom interface is hidden.
Yeah, if everybody goes to the top of the screen, there's a view options and you click the down arrow and you get the choice of annotations, annotate in the list, and then you can choose a stamp and a color and whatever else you want to do. Onboarding experience.
Or you can draw.
Click
Yeah,
on view.
draw.
Thanks, Valeria. Yeah, there you go. One-way classroom. Webcasts.
When you click on view, you see these.
Yes, I do.
Uh-huh.
I'm seeing Valeria. I'm seeing Oliver.
I've got a check mark in there.
I click on view and it just says standard, side by side, and full screen.
At the top, should be an annotate option when it pulls down. Valeria is way at the top of the star. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, I'll see that.
Here's my virtual copy. Here you can to you. The idea though here is that, you know, one of the things we talk about is the need for engagement. So when we talk about virtual onboarding, one of the things that I think is we need to include even more is to the far right, this issue of empathy. You know, leader is compassionate, leader as listener. The idea that you create levels of engagement, that no matter what technology you're using, there's a level of high touch that goes with it. That's one of my personal soapboxes, so I'll apologize for that now. But the idea where I've noticed a couple of folks going, you know, the coaching and mentoring, humongous. And when you talk about the idea of creating that psychological safety space, that's really where a lot of this comes into play. Because when we look at this, it is still all about the individual. And I'm not sure how to get rid of the stars.
You have to do clear all drawings.
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you. Too many monitors to look at.
Too
You know,
many.
the issue of this is that, you know, this is, if we think about this from a planning perspective, I look at this as onboarding starts before they ever start the day one. Try to focus efforts on a pre-boarding initiative. Things like those forms. Remember the forms that you had to fill out? How awful they are, and you're asking 14 questions, and somebody, you've always got to ask the tax guy, somebody, right? How many exemptions, you know, all those kind of stuff. This is a chance, send the forms out early. Have short little how-tos. Give people a chance to ask those questions. Have them done ahead of time. I'm a big fan of having, you know, little short videos ready, you know, key staff members, and let them explain a little bit of who they are, what they do. These are informal. Make them from the team perspective, not your CEO, not your CFO. Those are all out there too. We can all do that kind of stuff. But the idea is that you make it personal. You know, the issue is I'm working for this team, or with this team, and for you. You know, the CEO may be, you know, way over there someplace. I want to know about my culture, the people I'm going to have to interact with. If you can start, you know, accessing them to your platforms, whatever platforms you can get them into to get them involved in some of the informational content. And I will say one thing that the pandemic has really highlighted is the buy-in and acceptance of family. I mean, we kind of knew it, but this has had, there's a survey that was done recently by the Gallup team, and they came out and said one of the biggest impacts for employee success was the support of their family. And it says, when you say it out loud, you go, well, duh, you know, support at home means a lot. Well, you are home. Your support is like now. It's not like debriefing in the car to yourself for an hour or two. And then only having a short amount of time because, you know, now, you know, family and all those other things, the day's longer. So anything that you can share that allows the family to buy into it and feel good about what's going on is a really positive thing. Any opportunity to start creating this kind of a blended space where you can, you know, let people sit in on meetings, talk to the teammates they're going to be working with, have those kind of experiences where you can get to know people. So it's personal. They get to see what's in it for them, and they get to kind of get an idea of what's going to be expected of them. I think these are all the opportunities to start creating that engaging experience where people now are continue that excitement. And in fact, you can ramp it up before they actually start the first day. Now, of course, there are some things that there are legal issues and perhaps there's NDAs that may want to be included, how much you let people in before they're formally an employee. But I think the idea now is to create that engagement. And I'm sorry, I forgot to, Sandy, I think you mentioned it about, keeping that, day one energy level and to bring it up even sooner and create that power. The other thing I look at this in terms of onboarding is to extend the model a little bit and think about it from a training perspective. So that an example for me would be the budgeting cycle. Don't dump them on how to use all the tools all at once. I had a place where I worked where the budgeting cycle was a little complicated. And, we started training people on the new people on how to do the budget process about a month before the budgets were due. And we gave them, it was a combination of coaching, having a mentor, and online tutorials. But do it when it's needed, more of a just-in-time kind of framework, so that you can blend those. And we included also, opportunities to put into context, so that, you knew that you had to deal with other departments, how to deal with them. So not only technical skills, but behavioral skills.
Bill, I wanted to share something, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely, Sandy. Sure.
I was involved in developing and facilitating onboarding for a pharma company a number of years ago. I think it's important that we separate onboarding with mentorship. Mentorship should be part of the onboarding program, but it's not the same. Mm-hmm. Onboarding is getting folks comfortable, helping them understand their role and their expectations, giving them resources, helping them be successful. Mentorship, in my experience, is a separate program where you identify someone that you feel would be a good peer coach for that individual and kind of set up that plan and milestones, etc.
I'm sure you can see my face. I can't see yours. And you can see why I don't play cards. I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
But I challenge part of it. Okay. Part of it's probably semantics. Yeah. So I'll take this. Part of my focus is that that we develop leaders at all levels from day one. So I agree with part of what you described in mentorship being a more formalized process, and that there are mentor programs that many companies have developed. Right. And so perhaps I'm using a term in a much more broader term. Maybe coaching would be a more applicable, or a buddy. Okay. Okay. That I'm not looking at this as 100% formal, but I do look at a kind of mentorship model, and so come back to me and give me 3 minutes, and then come back to me.
Yeah, I mean I think we're aligned. I think we're saying the same thing.
Because I do think there is something to be said there, and Valeria, to your point about the hourly employees, some of this, you're right, you're stuck by hours and you're stuck by different states. But I have found that if you open things up, so I was responsible for a service operations, which included entire call centers. So we went from hourlies to exempts and non-exempts. What we found was when we rolled out part of this program, and it was purely voluntary. If you want to do it, you can do it. We're not paying you, and we set it up front. You can wait to day one. We found out that, and we followed up with them, because they had to come on and make an account. That was up to them. We were upfront about it. We found out that people that came up and made an account, watched the videos, filled out the forms, showed up that day with their forms, tended to stay over a year. And that's as far as we tracked them. The ones that didn't stayed within that kind of typical call center turnover rate of about 7 to 8 months, and they were out. It's interesting. And that's only, anecdotal from my experience of, thousands and thousands of call center employees for Humana Insurance. So, but it was purely voluntary. And we found more people starting to be willing to tap in just because they wanted to. So, but yeah, and to Jeff's point, in different states all have different rules. So
I'd like to make a point as well. I've worked in small companies and large companies, and bottom line, the best job I ever had started off with, it was probably, I guess, a medium-sized company. But from the very beginning, I was treated by my boss as a professional, as somebody who had the experience that I had. All the other onboarding stuff almost never happened. It was the typical fill out this form, do this, do this. But it was and I know it's a cliche, but it was that family feeling that I had that kept me there, and I was engrossed in the work that I was doing, and that kept me on for many years. And where I started to leave was when we became part of a much larger cold company where they said they cared about you, but they really didn't.
yeah,
And you could tell that.
yeah. Well, and you can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, this does come down to, leader at all levels and coaching those people in the leadership role to focus on the people. So, but that kind of takes me back, or takes me to where I'm going to come into. If you haven't seen this SHRM manual, this SHRM has got this called the 4 C's to Onboarding. It's a wonderful free PDF, and I've got a link to it. And then I've added one, and this takes us back to our conversation, Sandy. So here's where I'm going with this idea. I include the idea of career pathing, and I put this in place as a part of the onboarding process that people are aware of it. And we'll get more into this. And this is the idea that, you're coming on board, and we want you on board, and we've made a commitment to each other. We hired you, and we're expecting you to work for us. But it's more than just that. So it starts that engagement and trust conversation. But first things first, we need to make sure that we meet the organization's needs. So, compliance is number one. It's the lowest level, but it's the basic legal and policy related rules and regulations. Make sure that people, won't screw up and get the company in trouble. Make sure that, their documents, the government documents, everything's done through that employee portal, however system is being used. Now, if you have the option to do a pre-boarding, this is where I go, get it online, make it automated. This is a great way for HR to, monitor their document completion rates, and to limit access to the people who need those things at the time where, they need it. You're right. Compliance should be more than just legal. It should be, but I actually think this is an opportunity where we can create an alignment of purpose. And the reason we want to be compliant is because our purpose is to do good. And I think if we phrase things in that kind of manner, I think we could have a better way of getting some of those documents done ahead of time. In that, is the chance to clarify. And this refers to the idea that people understand what, the expectations they have of their job, the expectations that of what they're going to face in their day-to-day thing. And this is where, from an HR perspective and from an L&D perspective, getting access for people to the knowledge base, like a SharePoint, HR FAQ kind of things, HR related information, the things they need to complete those forms, FAQs on first day kind of stuff. That's easily accessible and pointed right there. Things that they can access that maybe, something they can share with family. Again, trying to create that engagement, that support. Do it from the time before if possible, make it accessible, and then continued time, going once the job is continued, to engage, all people with the relevant information that they need, along with calendar schedules and benefit information. A lot of these, this is opportunity to engage the whole family and engage the person, which creates that kind of opportunity to help them be, fully engaged in that. The next part about this is context. Now, the context of the culture And I worked for large companies, and those, Jeff, you might jump in with a smaller company. Even within a company, there's different cultures. Service operations had its own culture. The billing department had its own culture. It was really interesting. My wife and I, she's a learning leader as well, and we both worked for the same company in different parts of the business. And I'm in the service operations area. She was in the clinical learning and development team. And we would come home sometimes and go, guess what happened? And she'd go, oh, that never would fly in my area, and vice versa. So this is where you could start talking about culture from a broad category, corporate enterprise. But where people are going to live is where you really want to have the conversations. These really short videos can come into play to start helping people understand what the organizational norm is. Aligning people to purpose is key, and having the context of their work is going to be, I think, the important part about it. And that kind of is done by the connections they make, those interpersonal connections that make or break, a job sometimes. It's the relationships we make, our coworkers, with our leader, the people that we serve, people that we have to work with, like the IT team or the procurement team. It's those connections that I think are the strongest need we have to build in this onboarding in a virtual space than we ever had before. Before, you could walk them around and you'd see who they are, and you could, oh yeah, I got to introduce you to Jane. Well, I'm sitting at home. I might not remember that. So creating that kind of a formalized process for the new hire to communicate with the various people that they're going to have to work with. This is about learning the business. So think about it as a business acumen kind of, process, and start connecting them into using, internal tools if they're available. Things, like Buzz or Slack or whatever it may be. And this is that time where I'll come in and say, having a buddy, and I kind of used the word mentor before, but the idea of having a buddy maybe is a better term, to help create those connections, create those introductions, and keep it personal. This is where I think the opportunity to move from a formalized onboarding process into a personalized onboarding process is the big thing right there. Sandy, your point there, it's inclusive. And it really does, I think, the idea of we're productive when we're personal, and to Jeff's point earlier, you do things because of the people, when it matters, and, nothing goes farther sometimes than a sincere thank you. So, those are the kind of things I think we can keep into play. And then the last part for me is this idea of building in a career path up front. I want people to know, and I've done this and saw the impact it had on an organization when people understood that there was something in it for them. I wasn't just bringing you on to fill this box today. Okay, I lied. I'm hiring you to fill this box today, but the box can grow and you can change boxes, and we expect that. And I think this is the idea that creating that information, that this is an investment. We don't look at you as just a Band-Aid. Makes a difference. I think there's an opportunity that if that you've chosen an organization to work with, that the feeling that they're choosing you too comes all the way through. Now, that's got to continue through that process. So this is where HR and L&D and operational teams have to kind of collaborate and say, to move along the career path, you're going to need the following technical skills, behavioral skills, and there's different ways to acquire these kind of skills on the job, job shadowing, stretch assignments, training, maybe formalized education, and it has to go into a performance plan. But this is the kind of thing when you bring that model out and say there is a framework for you to grow and go in different directions wherever you want to go based on your interests and the needs of the organization, because it's a two-way street, but you can have a career here. That's a different perspective of how people look at onboarding now as just, I'm here today. No, you're here because we want you to be here. And that, I think, brings it back down to, what you were talking a little bit earlier, saying it's personal. This is about, it's all about me. So
you're building hopefully a long-term relationship.
Exactly.
Based on trust and respect, and helping each other learn and helping each other be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that comes back down to this high touch This is one of this is another soapbox I stand on, so I'll try to be careful. You know, I talk about the high technology, and Deloitte came out with this last summer, November. I've got here. I think that's what my notes here say. Is you know, we're seeing the change with the technology platforms, but it really comes back down to is you really need to have, you know, that interactivity. It's personal. And having those kind of ways to collaborate, ways to engage, kind of comes into all the different ways we use now, all the different platforms. And I think this is opportunities to start examining what we use, why we use it. You know, LMSs are great for training employees. Does your LMS allow external people to be used, like customers or consumers? If so, you know, can there be something out there for a new hire? You know, if not, you know, maybe this is when you start looking at other tools using different kind of SharePoint systems or learning experience platforms, opportunities to create those day in the life trainings that are more orientation oriented than formalized instruction. But it does create that opportunity to prepare the person to understand their roles and their responsibilities and the expectations that they're going into. When we know what we're walking into, we're far better prepared for what will happen and to shift with the tides at that point in time when they do shift. And a part of that comes into having information, but also having the connections. So I think it's that kind of opportunities with these kind of tools where, again, you can just open up the door and I'm looking at, you know, the hourly issue. It's like, it's an open invite, but it's totally up to you. But you can also open it up to other people too and say, we'd love to have you jump in on the meeting. You just can listen in, you know, we'd love to, you know, have you just hear the team and, you know, have a chance to talk. And this is where I will urge leaders at every single time, you know, make connections, create introductions, start building those relationships, because that's how the work gets done. You know, I recently had a conversation with a company that had brought me in because they're having a high turnover rate in their call center, and we'll come to find out that it's not a training issue. It's their process issue, because they've never documented some of the practices that they have in place. They've always been able to, they had some 3-ring binders, and they had a lot of people that had been there for a long time, and that, you know, you could just reach over the cube divider and ask. So, you know, this has kind of highlighted the fact that, you know, we do a lot of work based on our relationships, and who knows how to do whatever this problem is. So creating this opportunity to formalize practices and processes, that's a good thing, but creating those connections to people makes a big deal as well.
Bill, I want to add one more anecdote from
Sure.
my experience.
Yeah.
In this relationship, the company representatives need to provide the resources, obviously, but the employee also needs to take ownership of connecting, networking, speaking to specific individuals, learn by doing. You know, it's just, you know, they need to get involved too, in a formal or informal way, whatever they're comfortable with. So 2 sides to the equation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But this is one of those, it's a catch-22. You can't ask a question if you don't know the question to ask.
Sure,
And
sure.
you don't know what you don't know, which is why I think having a buddy and having an engaged, active leader
Right.
is a key part of this kind of creating this connection for people to be about. The other thing is tools like these, when you can get the person involved. You know, if you can do it ahead of time, terrific. If you can, and once they're online, get them involved here, because this is where people can start asking questions of a broader community, getting people to have a place to go and ask when you just can't reach over and say, you know, hey, Bob. I don't know why I use Bob. Bob's always the person I ask. I should probably like Bob and Barb, and I'm trying to be fair, but I've always in my brain, like, yes, Barb or Bob. You know what?
You use a name that could be male or female.
I should, if my brain would think fast enough.
Like a Terry or
That'd be
something
a
like
great
that.
one. That'd be a great one. I'll ask you from now on, because you're here. And this is the part about, I'll go old school at some point in time, but this is where I stress to leaders. This is the key thing here is you have to reach out to them. This isn't to take away from your point, Sandy, of saying, employees own this too, but especially in a remote space, you're not walking around getting coffee someplace and bumping into people in the hallway. So there's got to be a level of leadership that tackles the engagement issue and creates that feeling of comfort and psychological safety, as Valeria had mentioned earlier. So, little things, and it's amazing the power these little things have. Pick up this telephone, just check in.
That's a hell of a phone there.
I love that phone. And writing a letter. Oh my God. I blame my parents, but I was raised writing thank you notes, on real thank you notes, and to this day, there are times where at different parts of my career, I wrote an actual, I had a little stack of cards, and when somebody did something, I'd say, hey, this is important, and I'd write it down, and I have found years later, people still had those things, which that surprised me, but it's the power of taking a minute to truly engage with someone that, it matters. Jeff pointed out that it's the issue of relationships and the people. And that comes all the way together. So all these things kind of blend together. So let me, we went a little longer here than I wanted to do. Here's my problem. I was going to ask you guys to help me solve. And I have a solution. But this was a problem I actually ran into. Highly skilled incumbent workers. These are the best of the best. And they were made managers. But now they had to do things like assign people to work that they had been doing themselves, to budgets, and make sure that their branch office was fiscally responsible and profitable. And they were leaving in less than a year. I turned it around. We dropped the retention rate, or the attrition rate, down to about 25%. But just out of curiosity, what would you think about it in terms of creating kind of a program of this person coming into the role? You can chat, or Sandy, you can talk to me. You can ask Sandy.
Yeah, go. I mean, this obviously has an onboarding spin to it. Need to do a much more effective job of getting people started in the right way with the right resources. Seek timely feedback, understand the challenges of the role, and seek their feedback of what the organization can do to sponsor them in a more effective way, understand why they're leaving, that kind of stuff.
Well, maybe not everybody wanted to be in management. I've met many people in life who were great at what they did, but as soon as you made them a manager, and in fact, I was asked one time to be a manager, and I knew that was the wrong choice for me. You have to, like Sandy said, you have to look at the reasons why they're leaving. It can be different from each person, but if there's one big number sticking out there, you got to pay attention to that.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. Didn't really have the problem that people didn't want to be managers. That was not one, but we did ask some of the reasons, and part of it really came down to was because we started at the end, start with the end in mind first, and so we went, and as they left, the ones that would actually talk to us, because there's a little bit of they don't want to say anything bad. People don't want to be honest at that point in time, because you never know. Don't burn a bridge kind of mental model. But we found out that a lot of it was they didn't feel they had been prepared, and then they felt a little bit like they had been tossed into what Valeria had been tossed into, the deep end of the pool, and told to swim. The training had really been all about, here's how to use the accounting system. Have a good day. So we turned that around a little bit, and part of this was we changed a little bit. We said, we want to promote you, but before you would make a decision, here's some short videos. This is kind of a day in the life, and we had some opportunities for have discussions with people in those roles ahead of time. and then they could make that choice. So it was a little more allowing that power of positive energy to move forward up front. Now I use the term mentor. Probably coach would be a better term in terms of how Sandy and I think you and I are thinking of that word, but someone that could coach them that had come from me, who had just recently gotten into that position and do that. And Valerie, one of the things that was important was that we made onboarding existing employees the same as, if not more rigorous than for new employees. I think you're right there. Too many companies just, oh, you're already here. Well, here, start this job tomorrow. And that's wrong. Your role changes, so is your world, and so is your connections. We included materials and some training that help them about some of the new skills they're going to be acquiring, managing people, project assignments, a little bit about how to use the tools and the technology. And then we had kind of a checklist of, these are the things you're going to have to like deal with over the next, few years or next few months, and be aware of it. In that time, we also changed the whole model. This wasn't a one done or a couple of days here. We made a whole 12-month focus. Scenario-based, contextual. It was timely. So, the training that people went through was based on the calendar year, so the business cycle. So some people might have come in on a schedule. They came in. We had 3 times a year people came in these roles. This is when we hired cycles. So we had cohorts in groups. So depending on when you came in, you might get budgeting process training soon. But, depending if you came in a different group, you wouldn't get it until that other group had it as well, to make it more just in time, much more contextual, and create that. The biggest thing we really did, though, honestly and truly, was we made it a focus on the move from being an individual contributor to a leader of people. And in that, they needed time with their leader. Because I'm back to my example of when students would drop out is because they just never got any feedback. So we front loaded time, and we made it a part of each hiring manager would have in their personal annual performance plan. This is a part of your job, and you will be evaluated on doing this. And in that was kind of the 360 model. We'd ask those people, did your manager do this? So, they knew they were getting feedback. We also included in the learning management system some check-in points that they had to provide feedback, so that we could kind of keep everybody a little honest and tracked and accountable. But we had a lot of focused time with somebody who could help create that conversation about what it's like to be a leader now, and get some feedback with a leader. And then we kind of transferred that into the broader community spoke, where you had a chance to do, and again, I'm using this mentoring term, and I see your point, Sandy, and I'm going to rethink this whole how I use the term here. But this was more about supportive community in terms of coaching and peer-to-peer coaching on, the virtual, hey, Sandy, how do you do this? That somebody might have. So in that process, we kind of revamped how we looked at our orientation program. And in orientation was the idea that there was a path to success. In that path, a part of it was the learning function. And this is my role as a CLO, was that we kind of built this whole idea, this whole model, that there was a cycle that people would have to go through, and it never stopped, because this is a part of impacting performance. Also, this is a selfish part of me, was I take the Gallup information really seriously about the engagement factor. I'm assuming folks here have run about the Q12. Thanks, Sandy. I know I'm running a little bit late. Sorry. Appreciate your feedback, by the way. Was the idea that we had a focus on the idea that the cheapest way to engage people is to invest in them in training, and that if they know there's a future, they tend to stay. So we broke it down into kind of a calendar, and then broke it down by roles. And, I'm not going to go into on any of this. I wasn't planning it even, but we broke it down so there was a common area of topics, and then broken out by specific roles for professional development. And not all of this stuff is about technical skills. The majority of it is not. It's about being a better leader and engaging people and understanding what's involved in those kind of perspectives. So in this was the whole idea, and you don't have to take a copy of this. I've got a handout that, let's see, that I have for you about these. In fact, hopefully I can get it before Sandy gets it. And Sandy, I'll have to get it to you. I'm sorry. This is going to take too long to do this. I will get it to everybody. I have a handout I can get to everybody about these 12 points here.
And you can get it to me and I'll get it to everybody.
Perfect. I'll get it to Jeff. So, and the idea here is that, you know, the whole issue really comes down to is focusing on the person. You know, it's all about engaging that individual, being human yourself, you know, creating the idea that they are welcome and that they are wanted, and then planning in advance, you know, beginning with the end in mind, wherever possible, connecting and engaging ahead of time. All these kind of things that I can, you know, let you read about. I think one of the things that kind of comes into play with all of this is that the idea that you're trying to create is that as much as they have chosen to be with you, you want them to be with you. It's not like I hired you and you should be grateful. It's more about, we value you. We expect you to impact us positively, and we are looking forward to that influence.
Sure.
And here's all the tools and resources that we are going to bring to bear to help create that success for you. So I'm going to come all the way full circle and go, the idea here is that onboarding is not a one and done. It is a long-term investment, and it's the best opportunity to retain these people that you are bringing in for a long term. And in that, you will create their success, and in their success, you will create organizational success with that impact and positive impact on their productivity and their performance. I know the end got a little rushed. I apologize for that. I'll get that handout to Jeff that I probably should have pulled up ahead of time. My apologies on that. And I realize I've just broken 2 rules of presentations by apologizing for anything. So, but you're friends now.
This
so
was great. Thank you.
I'll trust you.
Right.
If you have any questions, I'll stick around and just talk. Sandy, thanks for going. I know you got to run.
Yeah, thank you. This was good. I
You're
mean,
welcome.
very, very relatable from both an employee as well as a leadership perspective. I'm actually seeing research now that there's a significant worker shortage, and this will help hopefully build that relationship. I went to, you know, whether it's retail or restaurants, I mean, they're really struggling to get people, and they need to do a much better job of keeping people, and that this is part of that.
Absolutely. And I'll say one other thing that I did change, and Valeria, that'd be terrific. And if they have any questions, I'd love to talk about this, because this is something that bugs me. But part 2 of the bugging me is how we look at roles and responsibilities, and how we acquire the skills and talents that are asked for. Too many organizations use job descriptions that are out of date and not timely, and tend to rely on just degrees. And I think that the opportunity to start looking at what people can demonstrate in terms of proficiency, if it's an accurate representation of the technical skills and the behavioral capabilities you want those people to exhibit, is more important. But that requires an investment of time to look at the role honestly, openly in today's context, and then interview